Saved it. We're good.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cover One Roundup here, live on the Cover One YouTube channel each and every Monday at 7 o'clock. Cover One, of course, the leading Buffalo Bills fan site out there. Nothing happened.
Let's just jump into that. Let's just jump right into that.
Nothing happened on Twitter this week. Cover One, of course, the leading one of many leading Buffalo Bills fan sites out there.
Great fan site. We are very proud of all 25,000 followers we have on Twitter, which is more than the 14,000 that a certain journalist
We're
has.
not doing it. We're not getting into it.
We're not going to go there. We're not going to go there with it. But,
I never said that. All I said is that Cover One is a leading fan site covering the Buffalo Bills. Great content here every night, pretty much, on the Cover One YouTube channel. I'll plug that more later, but before I do that, my name is Kyle Salegi. I, of course, am one of two hosts here on the Cover One Roundup, joined this and every week by David Fox. David, how are you doing?
We're doing great, Kyle. Doing very, very well. If anybody has not checked out the Isaiah McKenzie article that was dropped earlier today, very much worth it. And even more worthwhile is the interview that I stole everything from, which the Cover One film crew did on Saturday with the face of the franchise, Isaiah McKenzie. So check both of those out.
Great in-depth interview with Isaiah McKenzie, of course. Slot lock, maybe? I don't know. We'll get into that. We've got some stuff to talk about regarding Isaiah McKenzie, and we'll also talk about, after this podcast, of course, and then after the Air Raid Hour, which is after this show. Make sure to check out the Isaiah McKenzie film room if you have not so far, though I'm sure you already have. We saw a different side of Isaiah McKenzie. Obviously, he's an energetic, charismatic guy, a personality, if you will, face of the franchise as he reports. But you got to see the football IQ, the football side of Isaiah McKenzie, which everyone knew was there. He just doesn't really show publicly often, but he did in this interview. And again, real good stuff. So check that out. Also check out all the great just content here on Cover One. Again, this show, Air Raid Hour, Cover One Buffalo, disguised coverage, going deep. Bunch of great podcasts. Cover One Pass, of course. Great written articles coming out there all the time, of course. Affordable price. I think that's it. What are we doing today, David?
We're going through what we would expect to go through, which is training camp, because now we're over a week into Buffalo Bills training camp of 2022, which is such a fun thing to say, especially when you realize there's actual football to be played this week in the Hall of Fame game for all of 10 minutes before the backups come in.
Is that this week? Who's playing?
It is this Thursday. I have no idea.
Oh, awesome. That's great.
Truly, I know it's not Thursday. The Bills. So let's see. Do we know who's even in this Hall of Fame class?
We have to know. Or no, I was going to say the game. I would hope that the team is playing Thursday would know.
Okay. So it's the Raiders and the Jaguars, which means
absolutely
they must have
not watching that.
You don't want to watch Trevor?
LaVisca.
LaVisca. There you go. LaVisca before he gets traded.
To the Bills. I'm tuning in. We are going to talk about here momentarily a potential wide receiver joining the Buffalo Bills. Again, we'll get into that. But before we get into the Roundup, which there's a lot of stuff to cover this week, and also our takeaways from the first week of Buffalo Bills training camp, this show and Cover One in general are brought to you by, I didn't get the banner up. Oh, no. It's Underdog Fantasy is what it is. The answer is Underdog Fantasy. That's what this show and Cover One in general are brought to you by. And I got the promo. David,
there we go.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about Underdog Fantasy?
I would love to, because Cover One is excited to once again partner with the most dynamic name in fantasy football, Underdog Fantasy. If you have a home league and it's just the one home league and that one draft every year isn't enough for you, then Underdog Fantasy is for you. All the fun of drafting your own players, but without the waivers and lineup decisions. Best ball drafts allow you to have all the fun of drafting your team and all the chances to win big with none of the week-to-week hassle. Use promo code COVER1, that's one word, COVER1 with the number one, not the spelled out one. Don't
Right,
want
so
to
it's
make any
technically not a
mistakes.
word because it has it's a collection, an amalgamation of characters. Cover one. It's the promo code.
Thank you, Kyle. When signing up to make your first deposit, an Underdog will match that deposit up to $100. That is $100 free US dollars in free play if you use promo code Cover1. Even better, Underdog's Best Ball Mania 3 contest is going to make 3 players millionaires with an M followed by an alien. That's millions. That's right, $10 million in total prizes. $2 million to the first, $1 million to the second, and $1 million bonus to the team with the most regular season points. That's 3 chances to win at least $1 million. Sign up now, again, using the promo code COVER1 and take your chance at $1 million today with Underdog Fantasy. Thank you to Underdog Fantasy for once again sponsoring this absolutely ridiculous podcast.
Promo code Cover1. There you have it. We're company guys, David. That's what everyone says, right? That is often what's said about Cover1 and the Cover1 group chat is if there are such a thing as company guys, it's David and Kyle.
It's us. I mean, it's obviously us.
They put on
and they definitely pay us well enough to be company men.
Mm-hmm. Right. Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. So hey, Bills Mafia, let's start a fight, John says. Who are you, Josh Allen with Jordan Phillips? That leads us into the Roundup. This is the segment where we discuss the latest Buffalo Bills news, rumors, and other stuff in a quick and roundup fashion. So we will talk about the Josh Allen versus Jordan Phillips fight here momentarily, and we'll also predict who would win in a sanctioned MMA fight in the octagon. We'll get the chat's opinions on who would win in a sanctioned fight in the octagon between Jordan Phillips and Josh Allen. But before we do that, Andre Reed was on Instagram this week, David. He's often on Instagram, I do believe. I don't follow him. But
I don't either.
But I do think he's a social media savvy guy. Okay, right? Like I often see Andre Reed on social media. He posted a photo last week, it was last week at this point, of him and former Los Angeles Rams wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr., who of course is currently recovering from an ACL injury that he sustained in the Super Bowl, will not be healthy for much of the 2022 season. But he's a free agent right now. And Andre Reed said that he kind of pitched Buffalo a little bit to OBJ. David, it's not going to happen anytime soon. But would you be open to OBJ in Buffalo?
I mean, of course I'd be open to it because he's a good player. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, we saw this guy. Before he got hurt in the Super Bowl, he was on his way to what probably would have been a legendary type of performance, especially given where he started the year in Cleveland, and unfortunately ends up tearing his ACL during the game. But I mean, this is still a very, very good player, a youngish player, who is one of the better athletes when he's healthy in the NFL. I mean, I just what's the opposition here, really? That you have Jamison Crowder and Isaiah McKenzie and Khalil Shakir?
I just think the Bills already have a really good social media department, and they don't need to bring another video editor on board in the form of Odell Beckham Sr. They don't need that.
Well, sometimes you just have to accept the package deal of Odell Beckham Jr. and Odell Beckham Sr. and just say we just gotta bite the bullet. Some of these Buffalo Bills film editors are just gonna have to swallow their pride and just accept that they've got a new management
competition
and Odell. I would say new management. I mean, if we really want to sell this to the Beckham family, I mean, you don't just say, hey,
we're employing them all
and hang out for a little bit. You'd be like, hey, why don't we just put you in charge here?
We're putting you to work. I love it. Obviously, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this topic because we're here to talk about training camp, and if it is a signing that's going to happen, probably won't be for a long time. And when OBJ does get on the field, it won't be until the final weeks of the season. But OBJ and Buffalo would be electric. Like, can you imagine OBJ and Josh Allen? It would be incredible. So this is the best comment. McKenzie is Odell, identical in every way. I agree.
In attitude, in size, stature, playing ability.
Production.
statistical,
Yes.
production, yeah.
Yeah, all of it. Playing style, it's all right. They definitely okay. Tommy Doyle got injured today. He left practice. That's all I have to say about that. He'll probably be fine. Micah Hyde got hurt last week, but he was back today, so I had to delete that talking point. But also, I just brought it up. So what's the point? What's the point of mentioning that I deleted it? Josh Allen versus Jordan Phillips. This is what everyone is here for. Okay. This is what everyone is here for. They want our discussion about Josh Allen versus Jordan Phillips. This, of course, was the talk of the town this weekend. It's a non-story. It really is. It's Josh Allen. I mean, I'd be upset if they didn't fight, to be honest. Josh Allen's got that dog in him. So does Jordan Phillips. If you don't know the story, apparently earlier in the practice, Jordan Phillips had deflected a Case Keenum pass or something. And this had kind of gotten Josh Allen and Jordan Phillips going at it a little bit, like jawing back and forth at each other. And then Josh Allen runs a QB draw at the goal line, scores, gets a little shoulder from Jordan Phillips, and then World War III erupts. I shouldn't make that joke because we're dangerously close to that actually happening. But Jordan Phillips shoulders Josh Allen. Big fight ensues. Gabriel Davis jumps in hilariously. The fight was broken up quite swiftly. And then Josh Allen hit us with a MILF on Twitter, came out there with, "Man, I love football." The fight is nothing. The fight is nothing. It needs to be done. But the question has to be asked, who would win in a fight? Who would win in a real fight? Jordan Phillips or Josh Allen?
Oh, 100% Josh Allen, because Josh Allen will 100% fight as dirty as possible.
Wow, I disagree. I wholeheartedly disagree. On my old podcast, the Cover One Roundup, which we did, no, that's the current podcast, Kyle. On my old podcast, the Kyle Selege Variety Hour, training camp was my favorite time of year because we did a segment called Buffalo Fight Night. And so, which is kind of, I'm bringing it back. So we take the training camp fights and we determine who would actually win in a fight. And back then, it was 2019. Jordan Phillips was number 2 on my power rankings of who would win just in general in a fight. Ed Oliver was number 1. Harrison Phillips was 3. Jordan Phillips right there in number 2. So Ed Oliver is still with the team. He's still number 1. Jordan Phillips bumps back up there to number 2. Josh Allen's probably up there. I don't think he's taking Jordan Phillips.
I'm just saying, for someone like Josh Allen, I don't think there's any rules to fighting for him. I think he's going like immediate crotch shot right into like an uppercut. Like, I don't think he cares.
And you don't think Jordan Phillips can answer?
I don't think so. Not fast enough. Not fast enough.
Oh, so you're sizist right now. That's rude, man.
I will neither confirm or deny that.
See, this is a good point. Harrison Phillips we can say that, right? Kicks the shit out of anyone on any Bills team over the last 7 years.
Tag on now.
He was a wrestler, right? Which is part of the reason why Sean McDermott wanted him. But again, Harrison Phillips probably would be, now that I think about it, Ed Oliver versus Jordan Phillips would be a hell of a fight. Versus Harrison Phillips, sorry. Jordan Phillips versus Josh Allen wouldn't be as good of a fight, but it would be a fight I would want to watch. And we did watch it in the video. Okay, Buffalo Bills training camp is going on. The second week is now underway, but we're going to be talking about the first week, our takeaways from the first week, the biggest things that happened, biggest storylines, things like that, and just kind of give our opinions on how we think things are going to shake out here as the rest of training camp ensues here. And again, just our reactions from the first week. So the biggest storyline, or one of the biggest storylines that we touched on last week was Isaiah McKenzie. Isaiah McKenzie performing really well. Jamison Crowder at that point had only practiced once. It was day 2, and he had missed day 2. Since then, he has only practiced once again. He has now practiced a total of 2 times. Jamison Crowder returning to practice today. And then Isaiah McKenzie, we talked about Isaiah McKenzie and Khalil Shakir last week. The Khalil Shakir hype has kind of died down a little bit, not reading as much about Khalil Shakir. I'm sure you will when preseason starts up and he starts making plays in actual games. But until then, we'll just have to wait and see. But Isaiah McKenzie, the hype has not died down. Every time that the Bills have practiced this training camp, there have been numerous tweets about Isaiah McKenzie just making plays, just being the first team slot receiver, making plays. Again, has that trust from Josh Allen, showing a refined route running, because that was always the thing about Isaiah McKenzie, right? Is he was a good athlete, he was fast, speedy, good in rotational niche gadget roles. But as a route runner, he wasn't all that refined. He left a bit to be desired. Now showing some refinement as a route runner, which again broke down in that interview in the Cover One film room. Great stuff. Go watch that. But again, showing that he is a complete or a more complete player than the last Isaiah McKenzie we saw. He is now a more complete player, now more well-positioned to be a consistent contributor in an offense, as opposed to just, the gadget guy who could take end arounds and maybe line up in the backfield occasionally. Through the first week of training camp, it looks like Isaiah McKenzie can be a part of the offense, can reliably start at slot. So David, I'll throw it here to you quickly with Isaiah McKenzie. Just your thoughts on Isaiah McKenzie's continued emergence, but also we have to talk about Jamison Crowder. So first, thoughts on Isaiah McKenzie, and then Jamison Crowder. What's going on with him?
Well, so with McKenzie, I mean, I discussed a lot of this in the article that I wrote. Check out cover1.net for more of that.
We are plugging a lot of shit.
And that is a free article, by the way. That is not.
It is.
That is not a part of Cover One.
One pass, though not intentional. It's my bad because I forgot to click all the tiers, but happy accidents.
So be it. That's all right. The people need to know about Isaiah McKenzie. But what's interesting is that like we've talked about McKenzie before on the show and sort of been cautious or doubtful about this sudden leap that people were maybe expecting, which seemed to be based a lot into that New England Patriots game. Because we had seen McKenzie for years before where it was just like, this guy is now going to be in his 6th year. It's like, this probably is just who he is. But based on what he says and based on what the team seems to think of him and what everybody at training camp seems to see, I mean, he's making plays. He's more consistent. He seems to be just exactly what you would want him to be from that slot position role. So I think that I will be very, very excited to see exactly how he's going to progress throughout the preseason. And especially in those first couple of weeks of the season, of the regular season, to see like, how does he actually adjust? And I mean, that Rams game is going to be really important because Stefon Diggs is going to be going against Jalen Ramsey for 99% of the time, probably. And so it's going to be a big test for the two guys, the two darlings of fantasy football, really, in Gabe Davis and Isaiah McKenzie, to see, like, are they actually going to be the guys? And we'll see. We'll see. I'm more optimistic about McKenzie than I was before, though. So I'm more intrigued by the idea of starting slot receiver Isaiah McKenzie. So that's where I'm at. As far as Jamison Crowder goes, if the Isaiah McKenzie project does not pan out the way that the Bills want it to, then you have someone like Jamison Crowder who's very experienced. And this is sort of what's great about this slot position for the Bills right now. You have somebody that you've put a lot of time into that you like in Isaiah McKenzie. You have a veteran presence who you can count on, just sort of be exactly where he's supposed to be at all times whenever you put him in there. And you have a young rookie that a lot of people felt was a steal in the 5th round. You have options galore for this position should one or two players not be who you thought they were, or if they just get hurt. So the Bills have really set themselves up in a great position here with what they have. And as far as Jamison Crowder, I mean, obviously this was disappointing to see him not be practicing for a solid week or so. And that was always a concern with Crowder, injury and health. But, if he's healthy, he's as good a slot receiver as you're going to find in the NFL. And that's all you can ask for. So you just hope that he stays healthy for as long as he can.
Jason writes, once Crowder gets going and can stay healthy, no way McKenzie beats him, in my opinion. So the thing about Jamison Crowder is, or just the slot competition in general, I am fine with Isaiah McKenzie starting in the slot week 1 if there's a competition between him and Jamison Crowder and Isaiah McKenzie wins the competition. Like, this is all great, him doing really well, him coming out and performing. That being said, I still want it to be a competition. What happened to David? David's gone. That's not good.
I'm here. I'm just taking care of business.
Okay.
Keep going, Kyle.
I still want it to be a competition, right? I don't want Isaiah McKenzie to win by default, if that makes sense. Like, Khalil Shakir is giving him a run here, but I want Jamison Crowder to at least have the opportunity to win the job. It just sucks that he is, again, we've talked about this in the past. It's the health issues, right? That was going to be the thing that kind of prevented him from pushing Isaiah McKenzie or holding on to that slot job. And they're already rearing their ugly head before he even gets the opportunity to win the job. Yeah. So again, all the hype is with Isaiah McKenzie right now, but do not count out Jamison Crowder. Now that he is back on the field, assuming he can stay on the field, this competition is going to heat up, right? This was one of the few position battles that we were looking at entering training camp, right? Corner's not really a position battle. Punter, I guess, is. But slot receiver really is that primary position battle. And it's just been Isaiah McKenzie running away with it. But now with Crowder back, hopefully healthy, hopefully can get some sustained health here. We're going to see Jamison Crowder at least make it a competition, because right now it's Isaiah McKenzie. He's getting all the hype. But again, even if I've seen some talk, some chatter about Jamison Crowder's roster status not being certain, it's like, that's silly to me. Like, even if Isaiah McKenzie does start, even if Jamison Crowder, 1, can't stay healthy, 2, does stay healthy and loses the competition, why on earth would you get rid of Jamison Crowder?
Yeah,
that is the best insurance policy in the NFL at slot. That is the best insurance policy in the NFL. Assuming, like you said, the McKenzie experiment doesn't go well or McKenzie gets hurt, right? You do not get rid of Jamison Crowder because he lost the competition. Unless he just, packs it in and doesn't want to be there anymore and he's just not a good guy to be around, which that's not the type of guy that Jamison Crowder appears to be to me. Seems like a guy who's going to do what he can to help the team win. So even if he does lose the competition, why would you get rid of him? It doesn't make sense. Unless you want Khalil Shakir to be your backup slot, which I'm cool with, but I'm not getting rid of Jamison Crowder so I can maybe get Khalil Shakir on the field. Like, on my Super Bowl team,
there's no reason to be handicapping yourself unnecessarily.
Exactly. And that's what you would be doing.
Yeah. Speaking of competitions, Bobby Hart versus his shadow would be quite the battle at training camp. That's something that the real credentialed journalists ought to be following at training camp, honestly, is the battle of Bobby Hart versus himself. It sounds like a 30 for 30.
It does. Can Bobby Hart defeat himself? Can he get over his own battles of not being good at football?
What if I told you that there was an offensive lineman so bad, but no NFL team really wanted to get rid of him?
Daniel writes, Crowder's spot could be at risk if they need the money for something else like a Poyer extension. Plus, they have Shakir. How much money is Jamison Crowder making? David, I'll let you take this. I'll look it up. I don't think he's making that much money.
It really doesn't. I remember when they signed him, I was like, oh, that's pretty fair. That's a pretty reasonable
1 year, $2 million.
Yeah, oh my God, that's nothing. What are we talking about here? Come on, that's ridiculous. $2 million.
And Jason writes his contract is guaranteed. I think
there's literally nope. This does not need to be a discussion point any further. If somebody brings this up online, #online, then this is what you tell them. There's no reason to handicap yourself by cutting a player whose salary is already guaranteed and whose salary is only $2 million, less than $2 million. That's crazy. That is absurd. Ridiculous talking point.
John sums it up. Crowder staying.
McCaffrey.
I agree. I
That's it.
agree.
That's all we need.
Again, great insurance policy. Either good starting slot receiver or great insurance policy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Speaking of bad offensive linemen, like we were with Bobby Hart, the offensive line has kind of struggled, which has been indicative, or maybe not indicative, but maybe the word is foundational to the Buffalo Bills largely struggling offensively throughout this first week of training camp. There have been a few bright spots. A few times you've heard about the Bills dominating in the red zone. I think it was like last Thursday, maybe Friday, the Bills showed out at the end of practice in the red zone section. Josh Allen was like 13 of 15 or something like that, was just delivering dimes there in the red zone. But largely, I feel like I've been reading and I've been hearing, and the people who I've talked to, every week it's been, or every day it's been defense won today. Defense looked better. Pass rush overpowered the offensive line. There were offensive miscommunications, and that kind of attributed to contributed or led to interceptions, dropped passes, things like that. Or not necessarily dropped passes, but just like misrun routes, things like that. And obviously, look, I'm not hitting the panic button. If anyone is telling you that, I mean, I don't think anyone is saying that it's a concern at this point, but if they are, they're lying to you. The Buffalo Bills offense not being necessarily on the same page or not looking great a week into training camp with only like 2 days in pads, with a new offensive line coach and on a grander scale, a new offensive coordinator who is a first-time play caller. If they came out on the same page looking like they have in the past, that would have been more surprising than them having a few hiccups here at the start of camp. I will get into a rant if I continue to go, if I don't cut myself off here. So David, the offensive struggles.
Let me get into a rant then. So let's just talk about the fact that there's been multiple injuries to this position, including Tommy Doyle, if you want to include him in that. But realistically, like, I mean, Saffold has been out. Ryan Bates was out. Am I remembering that correctly? Yeah.
Dawkins had a personal absence.
Right. Yep. So shuffling is to be expected, and constant shuffling, like we saw last year with this team in the regular season, means you're going to have a lot of issues and confusion and at times just total meltdowns against a clearly inferior opponent, Jacksonville. That being said, the other part of this is this in a way does fit into or sort of play into what is one of Aaron Kromer's philosophies as the offensive line coach, which is to switch guys around and to experiment with different positions. And his talking point has been throughout his career as an offensive line coach when he does this is, hey, look, you're going to suck at this at first. And that's okay because it's a different position. You're not used to doing that. It's a totally different movement going from right to left or from guard to tackle or whatever it is. And it's an adjustment. But if you do these sorts of growing pains now, then when you get into the regular season, you're not there just sort of shitting your pants and hoping for, Josh Allen to continue to bail you out. And then when he can't, then you lose a 9-6 game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, there's no other way of putting it other than that. I mean, you have to be able. It's an issue in the fact that, like, it might just be preventing the offense from being able to practice the way that it actually wants to practice. But as far as it being a concern for the regular season, it's only going to be a concern if the injuries continue into the regular season, right? Like, if Ryan Bates and Roger Saffold and everyone else that we expect to be starting on this offensive line are starting in week 1, and they're okay, which is what we expect them to be. We don't expect them to be world beaters or anything, but we expect this offensive line to be average to above average. Then that's what we expect. That like I don't know why some people seem to be sort of actually, you know what, that's strong, man. I don't want to say that there's a bunch of people hitting the panic button or going crazy online or whatever, but I do just want to caution people before they go into pushing that big red panic button that, like, don't overreact until something bad happens.
Right. Yeah. Just like to explain maybe why they aren't coming out in such, again, like you said, it's a straw man to say like people are freaking out. I think people are largely understanding, but again, first time play caller, first time offensive coordinator, new offensive line coach with a new scheme / philosophy, injuries on the offensive line. And again, just in general, the defense always looks better in the first couple days of training camp, right? The pass rush is going to look good. And then with the injuries, they are playing 3 guys who are primarily tackles, none of whom very good at tackle, none of whom are like standout tackles, really. They're playing them at guard. So like Tommy Doyle's playing guard. He does not profile as a guard. He's like 6'8". David Questenberry is playing guard. He doesn't do that. Bobby Hart hasn't played guard in like 6 years. And we know how Bobby Hart is as a football player. Imagine he was a guard and they moved him to tackle to get him to a new position. Imagine him back at guard. Like that's like it's I'm not hitting the panic button in regards to the offense. Again, like I said, it would be odd if they were out and doing so well to start training camp here. And again, it's a week into training camp. It's cool. It's all okay. I want to talk about the tight ends because there was some discourse, David.
Yes.
People were upset that OJ Howard isn't making plays, to which I said, does he do that in the NFL? Has he ever done that consistently? That's not who he is.
I think the only time I can remember OJ Howard like making a highlight type of play is on that like leak concept where they roll the quarterback out one way and all the routes are going to like the right side of the field, and then the tight end who started on the right side sort of does a leak back out to the left, like a sort of long wheel route, basically.
Mm-hmm. I like how you've inherited my talking with hands.
Yeah, on it's great for the audio listeners. It's great.
Right, an audio platform. It's great.
But just imagine a long wheel route going the opposite direction of everyone else. That's what I remember of OJ Howard, but that's also not like why they brought in OJ Howard to play football for this team. Like,
right, he's not the player that he was at Bama. He's not the first round tight end mismatch nightmare. Injuries have kind of derailed him a little bit, kind of have prevented him from becoming that player, and maybe just lack of opportunities in Tampa in general. But look, like you said, that's not why OJ Howard was brought in here. He wasn't brought in here to be the first round playmaking tight end. He was brought in here so the Bills can play more 2 tight end sets and get some blocking prowess out of OJ Howard, so they can do some more interesting things, personnel wise, matchup wise. But again, people are kind of talking about, first it was Quentin Morris. Now they're talking about Tommy Sweeney making plays. OJ Howard performed better on Monday, but largely it is Tommy Sweeney getting a little bit of the rub here. Is this something that is a talking point? Is OJ Howard going to lose tight end 2 spot, or are we just making much ado about nothing here in the second week of training camp?
I don't think he's going to lose that spot. And if OJ Howard loses this tight end 2 spot to Tommy Sweeney, then that's probably curtains on OJ Howard's career. Actually, no, I shouldn't say that because Josh Rosen just got another job. So OJ Howard probably still has another 3 teams that are willing to take a chance on him to try and get something out of him. No, it is what it is. Like, you just it seems like a lot of the players seem to be adjusting to this new offense, and obviously OJ Howard, this is his first time out of Tampa since he's been in the NFL. So it's an adjustment period. That's part of training camp. That's part of this whole process, and kind of just have to take your lumps. I mean that's the nature of this sport. Is at times, especially early on, when you're learning, and when you're learning, you're thinking, and when you're thinking, you're not moving. So you gotta just keep those repetitions going, keep that practice going, push through those lumps, and eventually it'll all come to you.
I just think it's funny that the lamestream fake news media is criticizing OJ Howard for not being a player that he isn't, if that makes sense. Where it's like you're complaining about the lack of splash plays from OJ Howard in training camp, but like that's not what his role is going to be.
It's not what he does.
That's not what he is. Like I remember, I've talked about my dumb friend. I shouldn't say dumb friend. My
put him on blast on
right,
your podcast.
I've talked about him in the past. He has some killer football takes, but I was hanging
Mm.
out with him on the day that the Bills signed Von Miller and OJ Howard back to back, 2 signings of equal significance, of course. And after the Bills signed OJ Howard, he looked me dead in the eyes and he said he might start over Dawson Knox, and I was like, "What?
Honey.
What are we talking about? What are we doing here? This isn't Alabama OJ Howard. This isn't, you know,
And
top
let's
20
be
pick
clear
in the
about
draft,
something
OJ
here.
Howard.
Alabama OJ Howard had 2 good games in his entire collegiate career. It just that both happened to be national championship games against the University of Clemson. Like that's why he got drafted, and the fact that he tested through the roof, obviously, which the NFL always loves. But it was OJ Howard was always a big projection based on the severe lack of production that he had in college.
Right, size speed guy. He's fraudulent Kyle Pitts. Like he was
Actually a pretty good comparison.
Right, he was advertised. Kyle Pitts and OJ Howard were advertised as the same product. Kyle Pitts actually is that product. Yeah. Whereas OJ Howard is now the backup tight end for the Buffalo Bills. And then RJ writes, OJ Howard looked good today at camp, had a few solid catches and a couple nice routes. Again, he's going to be a fine tight end too, who plays a niche role and does so well. To say that you're upset that he's not making plays at training camp is silly. It's silly. And to say that Tommy Sweeney is pushing him is also silly, because let's be honest, Tommy Sweeney's not that great of a football player. Like, he can improve, obviously, but at this point, he's in year 4, entering year 4. I think we know what Tommy Sweeney is. We say that about Isaiah McKenzie as well, but to an extent, like, I think we know what Tommy Sweeney is. And I like Tommy Sweeney, right? He seems like a nice enough guy, likes the Grateful Dead, wears Grateful Dead shirts, right? Like, if I had a Bills comp, it would probably be Tommy Sweeney, in that he's like, wears a lot of Grateful Dead shirts and has weird glasses, right? We're essentially the same person. But he's got a weirder look, though, I will say, about Tommy Sweeney. But, you know, it works for him. He's working it. I just don't know if he's going to work his way onto the 53-man roster, which, David, that's part of a new segment later.
Josh Rosen is making every team pay that did not choose him by playing for them.
That's a great joke. That's a great joke.
That's pretty good. I might steal that, Jessica.
That's a well-constructed
just letting you know right now, I'm probably stealing that.
That was good. No, we have a new segment going on. I'll tease it now. It's called True or Rubbish. And I'll ask you about Tommy Sweeney later on in the show, and his roster status. The defensive line, we just kind of talked about the offensive line and just kind of the struggles, how, again, new system, new coach, new voice in the room, new ideas, and new players at old players, some new players at new positions, just kind of testing things out. And obviously, given all those circumstances, everything I just listed, and, you know, the first couple days of training camp being more conducive in general to the defense, this has resulted in the defensive line, the defense largely, but more, you know, or more microcosmly, right? More locally, the defensive line. I can't think of words quickly, which is not good for hosting a podcast, but more specifically, that's the word. The defensive line has performed really well. We talked about Von Miller last week. He's still a dude. He doesn't like Buffalo, though, and for that reason, I think his time here is going to come to an end.
You want to talk about a non-story or a bad storyline? It's these people, and it's not a lot. Again, I don't want to like paint it as like all these people are rising up against the scourge of Von Miller, but you know, the fact that there's people who are genuinely upset at Von Miller saying like, I wasn't really looking forward to being in Buffalo or whatever it was that he said. It's just like, honestly, like, just find something to be more insulted about than the city you live in. Uh, Listen, maybe it's just me because I've lived in a city that, like, it doesn't really exist. Like, it's a place and people live here, but, like, this is not a real place. Like, it's entirely made for old retirees who have far too much money in their lives, and this is their second home in the months that they want to be away from the snow because they don't want to shovel snow. That's why this place exists. That's why this entire city exists. This city exists because Thomas Edison and Ford, Henry Ford, whatever, were best buds and built their summer estates here. That's why this city exists. And everybody else has modeled their lives after that down here, essentially.
I am in a fever dream right now. Between the comment right here, you're going on about Thomas Edison. I'm just like, am I still here? Like, what is going on?
This is all to say, I don't care what Von Miller thinks of the city of Buffalo because he's an amazing football player. I had two vodka tonics before I came onto the show.
Hell yeah, dude. This should be a drinking podcast. We're kind of just drunk off life here, high off life, if you will. But no, like, I don't want to get too much into Von Miller in general because it's to be expected that, I mean, he's Von Miller, right? He's going to come out and produce in camp, perform well in camp, especially when going up against the likes of Tommy Doyle. But like Deion Dawkins has said, like, the presence of Von Miller is already not only helping the defense get better, but also helping the offense in terms of, like, Deion Dawkins, when he has a good rep against Von Miller, it's like, oh, I just blocked Von Miller. Like, that's such a confidence booster for an offensive lineman where it's like, I just blocked one of the best I just won a rep versus one of the best pass rushers in NFL history, let alone in the NFL today, in NFL history. Great confidence booster to be around that every day, to have that in the building. So again, it's kind of like the whole Emmanuel Sanders thing from last year, where it was just kind of, he's going to produce on the field, sure, but it's also the pedigree that he brings, to, you know, that legitimacy, the winning, or he's won in the playoffs, he won a Super Bowl. So just kind of the idea of a voice who has been there telling these younger guys that, no, you're good enough. I've done it and you're good enough to do it too. Now you have Von Miller to play the same kind of role, but at a bigger position of need. And he's still one of the best in the league at his position. That's all I have to say about Von Miller. But with Ed Oliver is a guy who is already benefiting from the presence of Von Miller and just kind of the offensive lineman not being that good. But all I've read from training camp these past couple of days, especially today, is Ed Oliver is a beast. Ed Oliver, I guess today, had 3 or 4 would-be sacks. I obviously can't take down Josh Allen, but had 3, not unless you're Jordan Phillips, but Ed Oliver, just throughout the whole session here, the whole training camp, has been ragdown dudes, just overpowering offensive linemen. And again, it's Ed Oliver. It's what we would expect from Ed Oliver. Again, has to be stated that he's going up against bad tackles playing guard. Offensive line is in an experimental stage, but Ed Oliver is looking like he's going to take that next leap.
Yeah. As we've said, or at least I've said on this podcast, and I'm sure you agree, Ed Oliver is good. I think that was either the first or second podcast.
I think it was the first episode. Yeah.
Yeah. Where the Ed Oliver is good sign. And it's true. And it's been true since last year, and it's going to remain true this year. And Oliver is good, and he deserves an extension. And he should get it because he's amazing, and I love my oversized horse boy.
Oh, okay. I was confused there for a second. Then I remember that Ed Oliver likes horses. He rode a scooter today.
That seems off-brand for him. That seems very off-brand for him. I don't get that.
I love Ed Oliver. Ed Oliver is just, he's too much. He's hilarious. And it's not why he's not a bigger star, why they're not marketing him more than they are. I mean, dude plays guitar, not well, but he can play it. Yeah. He's hilarious. He's dynamite with the microphone. He drives his, I'm talking like he's a wrestler right now. Dude's a great promo. Dude's got a great physique. But like, no, they just should be marketing him more than they are. He should be the face
Yeah.
of the franchise, in my opinion.
Him and Isaiah McKenzie, they can battle over that spot.
Who wins in the octagon, Ed Oliver or Isaiah McKenzie?
It's a very good question.
It's
It's a
not.
very good question.
It's not that good of a question.
I mean, speed is everything when it comes to this. Obviously,
Ed Oliver's got that get off though. He's got the twitch.
Yeah, but like, whatever.
It's Ed Oliver is the answer. James writes, I really want Ed Oliver to succeed to become that generational talent. Well, if he's going to, I mean, look, he is being put in the position this year to develop into that player.
Yeah.
We've seen the flashes, right? We've seen the high upside from Ed Oliver. Last year it became more consistent. Now you put Von Miller next to him. Buy your Ed Oliver stock, right?
I agree.
Buy all. Buy low. And I don't know how he's going to factor into the long-term salary cap here, but I hope they figure out a way to keep him. AJ Epenesa.
Yeah.
Carlos Basham. Boogie Basham. I think Basham got into a fight today, or Saran Neal got into a fight. There was another fight today.
Good for them.
Right, good for them, right? Yeah, we want feistiness. We want the content. We want the Buffalo Fight Night segment to return. The people are clamoring for it in the chat. They want Buffalo Fight Night. But I've read some AJ Epenesa hype, though I did read that he got blocked by Duke Johnson one-on-one, which is funny. Which is simply it's simply a funny thing that happened. But everyone has bad reps every once in a while. Even I have bad reps, right? This is one of my bad podcast reps this week. But not Ed Oliver, AJ Epenesa, I might be jumping off the AJ Epenesa hype train, despite the hype. Charles, again, thank you. Charles is doing me a solid here. Writes, heard AJ has looked really good. Could this finally be a breakout year? I doubt it. Honestly, I doubt it at this point. I like AJ Epenesa as a player. I just don't. I have been fooled too many times by AJ Epenesa. If that makes sense.
I am no longer holding my breath on AJ Epenesa. If he turns into something, good for him. If he doesn't, it's exactly what I expect at this point. And unfortunately, that particular draft class is looking pretty bleak between Epenesa and Zach Moss.
Mm-hmm.
It's not great. It's a good thing they got Stefon Diggs in that trade. Otherwise, things could be getting pretty dicey. And of course, Gabe Davis, Tyler Bass. But yeah, it seems like kind of I'm not even 100% sure where he even fits on this team at this point.
If someone does want to continue to have hope for AJ Epenesa, that's great. Like, I understand where you are getting that. But for me, as someone, I mean, everyone has followed the Bills for a long time, but as someone who has kind of too closely followed the Bills for a long time, he's giving me Shaq Lawson vibes, where every year, every training camp, it was the same thing with Shaq Lawson, who is ironically back. So that kind of proves my point here. But with Shaq Lawson, every offseason, it was, or every training camp, oh, he's coming back in the best shape of his life. Looks like a new player, looks great. Yeah. And then he flashes in training camp, has a couple of nice preseason games, and then come the regular season, he's a fine, serviceable player to, sometimes not great. Just not a great player, not worth the hype that we're giving him now. His first offseason, AJ Epenesa had a little bit of hype. Last offseason, there was a ton of AJ Epenesa hype. Came back skinnier as a different player, great shape, best shape of his life. And then, flashed in the preseason, had a couple of sacks, a lot of pressures. And then we saw what AJ Epenesa did last year, whole lot of nothing. And then this year, we're back again. AJ Epenesa, good shape. Flashing in training camp. He'll probably have a couple preseason games. We'll see what he does in the regular season. But I will be more surprised if this hype turns into something, if it turns into a consistent every week player.
And at this point, what exactly are we expecting from him to turn into? Like, what would be the success here? That he outplays Greg Rousseau or Von Miller? I don't think either of those things are happening.
I just want a player
And
who can get on the field. Like as RJ writes here, I would take Shaq Lawson's career for AJ at this point, right? I would
that's
take
fair. That's fair.
I would take 30 to 40% snaps, and I'm not worried about him.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Boogie Basham was the other guy that we're talking about here. Jason writes, I have more faith in Boogie than AJ. So do I, because I mean, we've talked about AJ Epenesa a lot on this podcast and what they asked him to do. And I've said in the past that AJ Epenesa's shortcomings as a player cannot be entirely placed on him because the Bills really haven't been able to decide what they want to do with him. Mm-hmm. They took this player who was kind of known for his power and tried to turn him into a speed rusher. He was too heavy, then he was too light. Now maybe he's the right size. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But they completely fundamentally changed his game, and he's trying to catch up here. Whereas you look at, maybe not fundamentally changed his game, but you know what I'm talking about. They changed the type of player that he is, which we'll have to wait and see if they reap the rewards from that. But with Boogie Basham, it's similar in that they tried to change his weight a little bit, tried to get his weight under control. It's less with Boogie Basham that they wanted to change his game, change the type of player he is, and more just get his weight under control, just kind of limit his role. With Boogie, it was last year like, you wanted him pushing 300 pounds because you wanted him to be that tweener. You wanted him sometimes on the end. Right. Sometimes you wanted him at DT. Depending on the package, you wanted that ability. You wanted to be able to do a couple of things with him. Whereas this year, it looks like they're just going to keep him at end for the most part, keep him, hand on the dirt there at the edge, which is what I want from Boogie Basham. I think his upside here is as that player, as that rotational defensive end behind Rousseau and behind Miller. And he's just going to, do what Boogie Basham does. Don't ask him to do too much. Just get his weight under control, have him come in, be a force, be a power off the edge.
Yeah, 100%.
Boogie Basham. Are we a pro Boogie Basham podcast now?
I think we are now. I think that's where we're putting ourselves.
It's weird because
we're plant our flag on that hill.
Had you asked me 5 minutes ago before I started this rant if I liked Boogie Basham, I would have been very apathetic about like.
Are we running up that Boogie hill?
Is that a reference?
Or are we making that deal with God?
I'm not familiar.
Oh my God! Never mind. Kyle.
No, but like again, I would have been like, no, he's fine, like whatever. But then you get me going about Boogie Basham. Apparently, I have a lot of Boogie Basham, and apparently, I don't like AJ Epenesa. Just get me talking, and I have opinions on Buffalo Bills, which is what a podcast.
You sort out your thoughts on the podcast. You have all these thoughts. You're like, I don't know how I think, and then you come on here. You're like, no, this is exactly how I feel. Damn it,
right?
And exactly. I'm gonna say it for everyone.
Right, put me on the spot, right? Don't hold me to the opinions. No, that's all I ask. Give me like 20 minutes to change my opinion. But when
I want all the credit with none of the consequences.
Exactly. Before we sign off, I need the chat to ask me if I still feel that way about Boogie Basham, and I'll let you know. Okay, the DBs. We have to deliver on what the thumbnail promised. Kaiir Elam. We talked last week a little bit about Kaiir Elam through the first 2 training sessions. Of course, Kaiir Elam, the first round pick out of Florida. He was matched up with Stefon Diggs, and as we said last week, it was going about as well as you would expect. Kaiir Elam being matched up on a top 3, 4 wide receiver would go. But since then, we saw last week, like mid last week, that Kaiir Elam got a little feisty, right? We saw a few Stefon Diggs, Kaiir Elams. It never turn into a brawl, never turn into a segment of Buffalo Fight Night, though we might talk about that. But, they had to get the MMA gloves on Kaiir Elam because he was getting a little handsy, right? He was getting a little feisty, which is, you love that drive. You love that dog in him, right? Kaiir Elam's got that dog in him. And then since then, I feel like that maybe lit a switch in Kaiir Elam a little bit where he's like, okay, yeah, I just need to play my game. I just need to be a little aggressive, a little feisty, get in their head a little bit, and I can do this. I'm as good as these players. I belong in the NFL, which since then you've consistently heard Kaiir Elam making plays in practice. Broke up a Dawson Knox touchdown today in the end zone. That's where touchdowns go. And then with he's had a couple of breakups on Stefon Diggs. I think he had 2 today, or at least 1 today. Going back last week, he had a couple there to end the week. And my favorite thing that I'm hearing about about Kaiir Elam is he kind of has this Tre'Davious White thing going on. where you think back to 2017, it started kind of in mini camp, but it was largely in training camp. The thing that you heard about Tre'Davious White from everyone who talked, you consistently heard it, was he doesn't seem like a rookie. Just in how he's playing and how he's handling himself, it seems like he's been here for, 3 or 4 years. It seems like he's a veteran. You would never guess he's a rookie. You're starting to hear the same things about Kaiir Elam with how he's kind of matching up on Stefon Diggs. At least it's more consistent, right? The wins for Kaiir Elam aren't, few and far between anymore. They're, it's a little more of a balanced matchup. And then you hear people talking, saying that, no, he's handling himself like he's been here before, playing like he's been here before. The task isn't too big for him. I mean, that's what you want to hear out of your first round pick. So, David, Kaiir Elam, the hype is real?
It sure seems like it. And I think that, having someone that was going to come in and be a contributor right away is exactly what they were looking for in this draft. They didn't want a project. They didn't want someone who might be limited by size or speed. They wanted somebody that they could just plug and play and feel confident and in their ability to develop him. And Elam certainly was not a finished product coming out of Florida. Obviously, hardly any collegiate player is, but he definitely had the size, the speed that has been missing from that CB2 position for a while. Pretty much ever since this regime took over, and they said, we'll kind of just throw whoever at CB2, whether that's EJ Gaines or Philip Gaines or Vontae Davis, and we'll just kind of make it work, But I do think that it's one thing to sort of be the guy that people look at and say, "Oh yeah, well he's just a rookie. He'll figure it out." Versus what we're hearing, which seems to be this dude's legit. This dude's gonna be like the guy that they want him to be, and that's what's encouraging and what you want to hear coming out of not just over a week of training camp. Especially when your cornerback one in Trey White is hurt and is going to need some time to get all the way back the way that they want him to be. And the more that Elam succeeds, then the more they feel confident in him, the less pressure I think they will feel to bring Tre'Davious White back before they feel they need to, or before he's ready. So I am very, very excited for this.
Yeah, and it speaks to the prowess of the coaching staff of the front office to an extent, but just the ability to identify the type of player and the ability to coach up these players, these rookies, which, as you said, David, you've said it numerous times in the past, this coaching staff, Sean McDermott in general, very good. Maybe right, the best, maybe one of the best coaches or coaching staffs in the league in terms of coaching up young defensive backs and helping them adjust, getting or turning them into the best versions of themselves. And you saw this is now 2 times that Sean McDermott has had a hand in selecting a first-round cornerback, and character-wise and on the field-wise, at least early, you're hearing the same things out of both of them, right? They're acting like they've been here before. The job isn't too big for them. So that's awesome to see. Also want to give myself a little pat on the back here. There's some Damar Hamlin hype going on.
Yes, there is.
Jaquan Johnson still appears to be safety number 3, which, I mean, he's been here for longer. You would expect that. This is like, what, year 4 for Jaquan Johnson? He also has thrown a pass. So Jaquan Johnson's been around for a while, a trusted special teamer and depth safety, good piece to have. But Damar Hamlin, with Micah Hyde going down last week, Damar Hamlin got a bit more playing time, and he's making plays. He's making plays, which I said he was going to do a couple of weeks ago. I said what Brandon Beane is probably keeping an eye out for this, or one of the things he's keeping an eye out in training camp is Damar Hamlin, especially with the just facts at the safety position with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer being over 30 and Poyer being on an expiring deal. Probably wants to see what he has in Damar Hamlin to see if he is a player who can develop. John DeMarchi.
Woo!
Big.
Let's go.
Thank you so much for the 1999 super chat. Very much appreciated. He writes, if you covered already, apologies. How worried are you at offensive line? Brown back injury rehab. Saffold out 3 to 4 more weeks. Bates out. First string, 0 practices together so far. Trade for Tevin Jenkins. Bears taking offers. Again, if y'all watch this show, you know I don't take segues. This would be a great segue into our truth or true or rubbish section, which we will address that later in the true or rubbish section. We'll talk about the offensive line depth when I ask David about the offensive line depth and just the offensive line in general. So thank you again, John. We will talk about that momentarily. But with Damar Hamlin, I think he is showing that, yes, he is a player who can be developed. He's more than just a depth safety who you're going to let walk here at the end of a couple of seasons. He is a guy who you can develop along, who can be a player one day for you. He can be an every week starter, I think.
I agree. This is somebody that some people really liked when he came out of the draft. The fact they were able to get him late day 3 and they've been able to stash him and just sort of slowly work on him and develop him in the background. This is somebody that could create a great sense of continuity for this team in the future whenever Micah Hyde or Jordan Poyer decide to move on. I'm excited to this probably not to spoil our own preview or of something that may or may not actually happen, but like we should probably put together a little list of players we're going to look at in the preseason that we really want to key in on, because I think Damar Hamlin's definitely going to be one of those guys.
He's number one
for me.
He's number one. Lafayette Pitts would somehow make my list, despite him not.
I was going to say, where's your man? Come get your man's, Kyle.
Man. I miss him so much.
Where's he at? Do you know?
Atlanta, killing it down there in the ATL. Which
now I just feel bad for him.
Like, I don't want to be misconstrued here. I'm not saying Damar Hamlin could step in and probably play super well this season. I don't think he could probably. I think that would be too much on the dude's plate. He wouldn't, obviously you can't plug someone in for either Hyde or Poyer and expect that duo to just continue to play as flawlessly as they typically do. Flawlessly is a strong word, but you know what I'm saying, right? They're a very good safety duo. So I don't think you could expect Hamlin. I don't think you could put that much on his plate right away, but give him another year, give him 2 years. This is a dude who I think could be a player. Okay. Nick McLeod has also gotten a little bit of hype. From what I've read, right, they're kind of moving him around, playing a little bit of safety, a little bit of corner, kind of flashing a little bit of both, making plays at both, interceptions at both. And I just wanted to say that so that when I talk about him later in the true or rubbish section, it's not like, where did this Nick McLeod talk come from? Like, this is the first time it's being mentioned. No, it's not. I just brought up Nick McLeod.
There you go.
Punt battle. There's a punt battle going on, David. You got, 4th, 5th round pick Matt Araiza killing it out here, booting balls. And then you got Matt Hawk, who's not as good. I think that's really all that has to be said. Why this is still a battle. Like, just the thing about Punt God, right, is like, dude's got a hell of a leg, but he can't hold, and his hang time's not great. Whereas, like, you read about Hawk and Araiza, where it's like Araiza's had a few errant kicks, but no more than Hawk. And then also he hasn't been bad as a holder, was perfect today as a holder. And last week at least one of the practices, Matt Araiza averaged more hang time per kick than Matt Hawk. So just, if I were Brandon Beane, I would just, I would call the competition now, give Matt Hawk a couple of weeks to go and take part in another competition, right? Because you spent a draft pick on Matt Araiza. What is going to happen is obvious. Like, unless you were not fully confident in Matt Araiza as a holder right now, which I would understand, but unless you were not fully confident and you think that in these last 2 or 3, however many weeks of training camp, he is going to get something out of Matt Hawk, being around Matt Hawk for this additional month is going to help Matt Araiza to the point where he improves as a holder, then I understand keeping Matt Hawk around until final cutdowns. But it's obvious who is going to win the competition. You're just delaying the inevitable right now.
Yeah, I think your point about maybe they're just keeping him around to try and have Araiza sort of soak up whatever they can from Hawk Because again, you don't have to make an actual decision until the final cutdown day. So to me, if there's stuff that he can learn from Hawk about just like certain habits to work on, and especially as a holder, sure, keep him around. It is what it is, and I think that's potentially one less thing for new special teams coordinator Matthew Smiley to have to worry about on a day-to-day basis. It's just like, hey, I can worry about coverage and blocking, and as far as the the technical aspect of like holding a football on a field goal. Well, if Matt Hawk wants to do it, let him do it. Teach Matt Araiza, that is. That's what I mean.
Yeah. Yes, the competition's over.
Yeah. And from what it sounds like, Matt Araiza had a good day holding today. So, yeah.
This is like election night coverage, right? As of 8:05 p.m. on August 1st, the Cover One Roundup.
We're now declaring a win for Matt Araiza. He seems to have won the districts of Amherst and Rochester. So
those are called the race. Districts. It's over. It's time, David. I have to pull up my sound effects. People are going to hate this, but I love it.
Yes.
Again, as we said last week, David, we make the podcast for us, right? We do things that make us laugh. That's all we do it for. And it seems like some people like it, which is great. It's time for our new segment, True or Rubbish.
Let's see if it's true or rubbish. Let's go.
So there's the sound bites. True or rubbish, David? What is this segment? Well, it's your standard buy or sell segment that you've seen on numerous other sports talk shows, but I wanted my own. I wanted the best version of it here on the Cover One Roundup, which is what we do, right? We take sports talk to the next level, and we make it quirkier and weirder. We have great discussions here, and that's what we are going to do for the buy or sell segment idea, right? The fundamental idea, we're going to revolutionize it, and that's what we're doing here with True or Rubbish. It's just buy or sell, but I wanted a different name, so I went to TikTok and I found my favorite TikToker, and it is a young British boy, a British child who tests the latest TikTok trends, and what he does is he determines whether or not they're true or rubbish. So I've taken his voice, and they're now part of the soundboard for this podcast. So, David, I am going to propose to you 5 in total scenarios, one by one, obviously. And then you are going to tell me whether or not said scenario is true or rubbish. It's rather self-explanatory. Okay.
Yes, it is.
Scenario number 1, David. Are you ready?
I'm here and I'm ready.
Tommy Sweeney will push O.J. Howard for tight end 2 or for meaningful playing time. Tommy Sweeney will make the roster and push O.J. Howard for meaningful playing time.
I'm going to call that rubbish.
Rubbish all after all. It was all rubbish.
It was all rubbish.
God. Jesus Christ. What am I supposed to do with this?
You're supposed to say why it's rubbish. Why won't Tommy
Sweeney? That's right. Howard? There we go. That's, oh my God. So sort of what we talked about earlier, like if Tommy Sweeney is going to be pushing OJ Howard for playing time, or anything even remotely close to that, then OJ Howard is just not even remotely close to what the Bills are expecting him to be. So I would be surprised if Tommy Sweeney even just straight up makes this roster, given how many other positions, particularly on defense, are going to be taking up a lot of roster spots. I just don't think that adding a third tight end makes any sense. So I'm calling rubbish on that.
Calling it rubbish. I don't have the chat open right now because, as you can hear, the dirt bike's going up my street. Buffalo is a great place to live. I don't have the chat open because I have to have the soundboard open, but I trust we're getting rave reviews in the chat right now. I'm sure the people are loving True or Rubbish, and they're loving the sound effects. Okay, next scenario, David. Nick McLeod makes this roster as a versatile depth defensive back.
So let's talk about defensive backs for this team, right? You have 5 starters, right? You have 2 boundary corners, a nickel, and 2 safeties with this team. You also have Tre'Davious White, who is not going to be playing for the first couple weeks of the season. So now you're up to 6 players right there. Then you have Saron Neal, who is going to be a special teams guy that they've paid quite a bit of money to be a special teams guy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 7 players before you even get into like legitimate, true backups. I'm the scenario is he makes the roster.
He makes the roster.
We're gonna go with rubbish.
That is rubbish. All after all, it was all rubbish.
God,
it's a great bit, David. It's a great bit.
So
just admit it, embrace it.
To me, I think that there are tons of defensive backs on this roster that are worthy of a roster spot, and one of those guys might be Nick McLeod. And this opinion is certainly subject to change if the preseason goes his way. But as of right now, I just think that is an extremely crowded room with not a ton of spaces at the moment.
That's interesting. I like the versatility of Nick McLeod, especially with them trying him a little bit at safety. I mean, would say you can get him on the practice squad. But
they did draft Christian Benford for that same reason, though. They talked. He's a corner who they said, "Hey, we might try this guy at safety too."
But I've heard some like Christian Benford hasn't been great, which you would expect out of a whatever round corner from Villanova, right? You're not expecting him to be a world beater. So I think for them, Benford's probably a practice squad guy.
Do you think it comes down to those two? Do you think that that's sort of
the debate
spot? Like those are the 2 guys that they kind of put against each other and say, they're kind of similar in skill set. We kind of view them in a similar fashion. Like it's one is for sure going to make the roster, and one is going to we just hope that he's going to clear waivers and get on the practice squad.
Well, it's interesting because the dirt bike, it comes down to they have evidence that it's tough to stash Nick McLeod on the practice squad, right? It's happened to them before. They've tried to do it and it hasn't worked. Cincinnati claimed him and he played a couple of games. So if it does come down to, okay, we want to, it's between them and all things are equal, like barring one of them being incredible in the rest of training camp and then the preseason. If it does come down to, again, everything's equal, we need to make the decision between McLeod and Benford for the roster. You probably give the edge to McLeod just because he's tough to get on the practice squad. They tried and failed once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's very fair.
Scenario number 3, which goes back to John DeMarchi's super chat from earlier. The Bills' offensive line depth is perhaps a bigger concern than we initially thought.
I am also going to call that rubbish.
That is rubbish all after all.
Wow.
It was all rubbish.
It was all rubbish, David.
It's possible that this becomes a bigger problem than we thought or hoped, but when 3 of your starters are out and you have to play Bobby Hart at guard, like I don't know, I'm not like concerned about that. Like it is what it is.
But it's not a concern to you that Cody Ford, is it an indictment on Cody Ford, or is it indicative of Cody Ford not being great that they gave him like a couple of snaps, then they were like, Tommy Doyle, you're going at guard, Quisenberry, you're going at guard, Bobby Hart, you're going at guard. It's like, that's how not great. Or is it an instance of Aaron Kromer, like you said, he likes to experiment. Is it him wanting to see what he has, the versatility he has in certain guys, or is it
I
their
think that's
offensive guard depth is so bad?
I think that's a great question to which we do not have a very good answer to.
That's a good point.
And it sucks, and that's kind of a cop out to say, but sometimes coaches are just enigmas, and they do things their way in a very specific way, and sometimes maybe even they don't know why they did something in the moment. But as long, here's the thing: if the two starters in Saffold and Bates are healthy and ready to go by week 1 to play Aaron Donald, I'm not going to be overly concerned. And as far as depth goes, I think that the more reps they get throughout the preseason and in training camp, I think you'll see them feel a little bit better and more confident in the position that they're playing, or in the positions multiple that they're playing. So
to go back to John DeMarchi super chat, just to make sure that we cover everything. About the offensive line, about the first team, the starting 5 not being able to gel together, about missing these valuable early training camp reps. And in the case of Saffold, probably not going to get many training camp reps. And then Bates missing opportunities to, adjust to the new system. I'm not happy. Like, I'm not concerned. But I'm also not losing sleep. If I ever lost sleep about the offensive line situation, kill me. I've gone too far. But I'm not overly concerned, especially with Saffold, just because one of the reasons he signed here was his familiarity with Kromer, right? The system, I'm sure, is going to have a few subtle differences here in Buffalo, but he knows Aaron Kromer, likes him enough, is familiar enough with the system to sign with a team that has him as the offensive coach, and that being one of the deciding factors in him signing with that team. So with Saffold, it's not a huge concern. It's more so a concern of, let's hope he can get healthy. Let's hope he properly heals from that. And then with Bates, it's interesting. You got to think that's going to be a sooner rather than later type of thing he comes back from, right?
Yeah, probably.
And then with Spencer Brown, again, he's slowly making his way back in the lineup, so that's fine at this point. And then Tevin Jenkins. I don't know if you trade an asset for Tevin Jenkins. I don't think you have a big enough
Cody
need on
Ford
the
for Tevin
line.
Jenkins. Who says no?
Not me.
Probably the Bears.
I certainly.
The Bears would probably be so insulted they just hang up. They wouldn't say anything. It's just like, all right, goodbye.
Right. Is this a prank call? Is this that guy from the Cover One Roundup doing his Brandon Bean voice again? That's exactly what they would say. Okay. Next scenario, David. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
We're kind of broadening our scope here from training camp in general, and we're talking about the season. In particular, right now, the whole season, and then more specifically, week 1 here with our next one. But this one, true or rubbish, Ed Oliver finishes the season with more sacks than Von Miller.
This is tough.
It is tough.
This is tough.
I don't give softballs here on true or rubbish. This is a respected journalistic, segment here.
Verified journal. I mean,
This isn't no fan site
this
bullshit.
This is no fan
David.
site. I'm gonna say true.
This was true all after all.
Whoa!
Can't believe it. It was true.
It was true. That's crazy. Why do you say that?
Partly to be a contrarian.
Okay, cool. Good to know.
I don't know. I think if let's say, for example, that Greg Rousseau has the type of year that we think he could have. I mean, that in itself might take some sacks away from Von Miller, and maybe it's a case of Von Miller being more of a pressure guy than a sack guy. Maybe not. I think regardless of any of those circumstances, though, I think Ed Oliver is primed to be a legitimate NFL star this year. And I think that will include I think it could include a 10 plus sack season for Ed Oliver.
Right. Yeah. I agree. I agree.
I mean, how many did he have last year officially?
5 or
4 or
6, I
5.
think.
Was
4
it
or
6?
5. Maybe. See, he
I'll
had like a
have-
couple
I'll have-
taken away. So
He
officially,
did.
where there was the,
And that's okay. So he had 4 official sacks. You could probably double that, honestly, with what he had taken away, or just like was a quarter of a second
like
away
this
from.
close.
Yeah. So, honestly, I really think that you could legitimately see about 10 sacks or more from Ed Oliver, and if that's the case, I mean, it's certainly possible where like Ed Oliver has like 10 and a half sacks and Von Miller has 10 sacks. And I would be right.
As Nick writes here, nope, but I bet Oliver gets more than 10 plus sacks.
Yeah.
Oliver at
Yeah.
11, Von at 13.
Sure.
Right. They're both, I think, going to, if they don't usurp 10 sacks, they're both going to be right around there pushing it.
Yeah.
But regardless, I think we're going to be happy with the production of Von Miller and Ed Oliver, regardless of how the final sack numbers pan out there. I would feel bad, though. You proposed Von Miller being more of a pressure guy as opposed to an actual production sack guy, right? Like he's actually making an impact on the field, but the stat watchers are going to look at his cap number and his sacks and be like, they paid $120 million for 2 sacks, which is going to be great. But like, I would feel bad for Aaron Quinn because he has been defending Jerry Hughes for years with his pressure's great. He just doesn't really finish, but his pressure numbers are great. If he now has to recycle that argument for Von Miller,
I 100% agree that with Aaron Quinn on that particular point, but I don't think there's ever been a point in my life where I actually feel bad for Aaron Quinn. So,
wow. Yeah, what do you give the man who has everything, right? Aaron Quinn.
Except hair.
Oh, wow. That's good. That was a good one.
I only say that because I know he can take that.
Right, yeah.
He'll probably shit on me later. So.
That was good. That was great. It's okay. He doesn't watch. Okay. Last true or rubbish. Isaiah McKenzie starts in the slot week 1.
True.
This was true all after all.
It was true all along.
It was true.
Wow, and that's it with the sound effects.
I mean, it really does seem like that's where we're trending with Isaiah McKenzie. That by both his own ability and his own work and his production throughout training camp, and also just some circumstances with Jamison Crowder being injured for the most of the first week, and Khalil Shakir just being a rookie and having to deal with pains and adjusting to the NFL. It just sort of seems like Isaiah McKenzie is going to be the week 1 starter in the slot. And, again, like we talked about earlier, if that's the case, it's going to be a big test for him and for Gabe Davis to be the guys that we want them to be, because Stefon Diggs is going to be battling against Jalen Ramsey. And while I think both Diggs and Ramsey are going to go back and forth and have their own little victories, it's going to be very difficult for Diggs to separate from Ramsey. And that's not a slight against Diggs, but if he wants to take that and use that as fuel, go for it. Put it up on the bulletin board, Steph. But I do think that he would acknowledge that too. It's like he's Jalen Ramsey's one of the best corners in the NFL. That is what it is. So you need to rely on the other guys, and Isaiah McKenzie is going to have to be one of those guys, assuming he's going to be the starter.
That wraps up the first ever edition of the
the
critically
true or
acclaimed
rubbish.
True
Let's
or
go.
Rubbish segment on this week or on this podcast. Everyone loved the segment. I've not seen one negative comment about True or Rubbish. Could this already be the most beloved segment in Bill's podcasting history?
Thank you for tuning in to the Cover One Roundup. We are
We had a great time. A lot of fun was had
We had a
this
great
week on
time.
the Cover One Roundup, as it always is. So yeah, I think that wraps it up. So I'll give the outro here. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the Cover One YouTube channel. Great content here. Most nights of the week, as we said. Usually on Tuesdays we have the Going Deep podcast. Also have Film Room, but I think they're taking a break this week after the Isaiah McKenzie interview. Right, they more than made up for it this last weekend. So just watch the Isaiah McKenzie interview again. Also, Air Raid Hour on Mondays. Wednesdays, you got Disguised Coverage and Cover One Buffalo. Bunch of great content here on Cover One. Also, subscribe to Cover One Pass. Become a insider. And again,
One of those.
right, by becoming an insider, you get access to the written content on the site. David, you write it. So does Greg Vorse. So does Hans Hansen. So does Ryan Sullivan. Great stuff going out there all the time. Eric also produced banger content. So
That's right. We don't let Ryan write about food though. Just throwing that out there.
No, no, absolutely not. Keep him away from.
That was part of his contract.
Right, yeah. But so yeah, check out Cover One Pass. Also, you'll have access to the Cover One Premium Slack, which great conversations always going on in there. Also, consider checking out Underdog Fantasy, and if you do, use promo code Cover1 when making your initial deposit, and they will match your deposit up to $100 US. Again, I still haven't cleared that it's US dollars. You can only assume, right? Though the euro is roughly even right now, you can assume, right, that it's that they're just operating in US dollars. So subscribe to the Cover One podcast feeds on iTunes, Spotify, all that great stuff. Leave a review, and I think that wraps everything up. So thank you guys for watching. David, where can the good people find you?
The people can find me on Twitter at DFAUXY at DFoxy. You can also find me writing on the Cover One website, as Kyle mentioned. And I just put out a piece this morning about our beloved face of the franchise, Isaiah McKenzie. Kyle, where can the people find you while I get rid of this porn bot?
Right, yeah, you can find me blocking porn bots in chat, and you can also find me on Twitter at Kyle Salagi. The name is spelled right there. Thank you guys, which again is great for an audio medium. Thank you guys for watching. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.